Before we dive into today's episode, I've got to tell you about my personal journey with Munn Avenue Press. As an author myself, I've experienced firsthand their magic in turning books into bestsellers. They empower aspiring authors, giving voices like mine the platform they deserve. If you've got a story to tell and a dream, Munn Avenue Press is the ally you need to publish and market your book. Visit them at munnavenuepress.com. That's MUNN press.com to start your publishing journey, just like I did. Welcome, Season Sixers. As always, thank you for being part of our Color Success podcast family. I'm your favorite host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Keep your eyes peeled for my brand new book coming out. It's called Cancel the Filter, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Subscribe to colorsuccesspodcast.com to be on our waiting list. Seats are limited and being filled as we speak. We're also streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the couch, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. LeRon Barton is a writer, author, and speaker that writes and talks about race, mass incarceration, being Black in tech, politics, business, storytelling, and dating. He has appeared in Black Enterprise, Newsweek, Salon, East Bay Express, and Harvard Business Review. LeRon is also a 3-time TEDx speaker that has given talks at the Oxford Student Union, United Way, and Bitly. Thank you so much, LeRon, for joining me today. I know we're going to talk about so many interesting topics, including the justice system and what happens when you speak out about racism.
I'm very happy to be a part of this podcast. Thank you for allowing me to come on, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
You started speaking out about racism.
Right.
So how did that kind of progress?
So after the Trayvon Martin shooting, just something in me kind of woke. I mean, it erupted. Like, I was always hypersensitive to race in America because, I mean, being Black, you see that it just comes at you every single day. You don't even have to look for it.
Yeah.
But when I started to talk about, okay, well, why was he killed? Why does a Black boy have to be a threat? Why are we viewed a certain way? And so people, they were like, oh my God, like, what does race have to do with it? You don't know if he was out there stealing, getting ready to do something criminal. And I was like, well, why does he have to be a criminal? I would challenge certain friends. And of course, they'll be like, oh my God, why are people looting and rioting? And I would always call it an uprising. I'm like, look, this is because of the systemic racism. At the time, I really didn't have that language, Stephanie, but
yes,
I just saw that as I got sort of deeper into the quote unquote movement, that's what I like to call it. And, my content shifted from like writing about like stuff about dating. I wrote a piece about reconnecting with my father, and I wrote a piece about like a friend of mine coming out. When it shifted to just really talking about, racism, white supremacy, people started to kind of back off, and I just started to see, white friends, there was a level that they could not meet me at. You know what I mean? There was a ceiling where they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to examine like my racism. I just want things to be fun and happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to have a good time, LeRon. But when you see something, you can't unsee it, Stephanie. And so, as I grew into, my anti-racism journey, I was just like, look, if you can't meet me there, then, we're just not meant to be friends. And so I just wanted to talk about my journey and just, tell Black folks and just any racialized peoples that, like, when you begin to talk about race, majority of white people will just sort of fade out. And I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, that's America. And also to not be ashamed of doing that. So many of us, we tend to want to placate. We tend to want to kind of keep the peace. We want to soften up the message, but that's not doing you or anyone uh, any any kind of positive service. That's doing you a disservice. Because when you don't tell your truth, that means you're lying. When you don't accurately describe your experience and and when you want to soften it up, and if and you want to pad it, that's not accurately telling about everything that you're going through. And you shouldn't have to pad your story, your experience, just so you don't offend other people.
Well, let's talk about the fallout though that happens, because there are several times where I have spoken up about white privilege, about racism, anti-racism, and it is so uncomfortable when someone is just so unreceptive and then turns the table because
Right.
they think that you're being racist, and the
Absolutely.
very
Happens all the time,
ideology,
right?
right, or that foundation of racism is that you're a part of an oppressed group. And so
Right.
it is very difficult to have these conversations in, say, corporate settings or interactions between colleagues, friends, etc. And so how have you coped with that fallout?
You know, again, what I've realized, Stephanie, is that there's only there's going to be a certain limit. I mean, like, there's going to be a certain ceiling that people will go to. I mean, I don't have friends that I can't talk about these things with. I
Mm.
mean, you know, since I write and speak about racism, I talk about it every single day. I mean, I again, as I said earlier, when you see the system for what it is, and when you learn about it, you can't unsee it. That doesn't mean that I can't have a good time. That doesn't mean that I can't joke with you. It's just that I just find that white people tend to just, they tend to shy away. And you know, prior to 2012, I mean, I was dating a white woman. I had white friends, but now I got maybe two, maybe three at the absolute most. And that was from maybe like 7 or 8 folks, and they just fell off. And I'm okay with that because and it's something like that I always say, Stephanie. I would rather be rejected for who I am than be accepted for who I'm not. And
Mm.
so, in order to be in company with LeRon Barton, you have to know that my race, my culture is extremely important. It's central to who I am. And my work is primarily all about trying to dismantle the system of racism, white supremacy, anti-blackness. So if you can't hang with that, I mean, it's cool. Like, I don't get invited out a lot, miss out on the happy hours, miss out on the parties, but cool, great. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be around people that want to be colorblind, because you and I know colorblind, it's just, it doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot get around race, and even if you try, you're a fool.
Well, I love the bluntness because I think that there are things that you're saying here that sometimes I can't always say that may be on my mind.
Right,
And I think there's this idea that color blindness is a positive thing. So let's unpack that a little bit, because
right.
people will say, well, I think that I treat everyone equally. I don't see color. And so let's talk about, why isn't that the way to go in your perspective?
Very good question. So I never forget. This clicked with me. I was watching a series on HBO called Asians in America, right? And towards the end of the series, they had this really wonderful young Asian sister. She said, she was recalling a conversation she had with a white friend, and the white friend was like, "Well, I don't see you as anything but my friend. I don't see your color." And the young lady said, "Stop. I want you to see all of me, because I want you to see my experiences. I want you to acknowledge who I am." Listen, color blindness doesn't exist because, for one, and I can only use America because I've never lived anywhere else, Stephanie.
Sure.
But America operates on race. It's been that way since the inception of the country, since we enslaved Black people, since we
Hmm.
poisoned and wiped out indigenous folks. This has there's been so much documentation that
Oh, it was
has
never set up equal. Let's be
no,
honest.
it's never has, right? So it's like in order for us to be colorblind, we would have to live in a utopian society, and America's far from that. Secondly, my experiences, my background is a part of who I am. So if I'm talking to you, if I want to quote unquote see you fully, then I have to accept all of that. And for me to not accept that, or for me to just want to bypass that, then that's not acknowledging who I am on a real complete level. And that's just false. There's no way that, again, in a country that's set up the way it is, for us to be colorblind, it doesn't exist. Like, I don't understand the reason for people not wanting to acknowledge race. I mean, it's funny because I saw something like like Bill Maher has. I don't really pay attention to him because I think he's racist, and I don't have time to sort of take that in. But I saw a headline. He said something to the effect of, uh, this is what MLK wanted, for us to be colorblind in a society. And so what that says for me, Stephanie, is that you want to not acknowledge how systemically racist this country is. You just want to just treat people normally, which in theory, that's a very good thing to do, right? Everyone should be treated the same, but I don't sort of delve into theory too tough. I'm into what's real, and race is
Experiences.
real. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, again, you have to ask yourself, would you be so why would you be so hesitant to acknowledge my race and to acknowledge who I am, my story, my experiences?
Well, I think there's a protective piece, right? Because let's just say a person says, I am racist, then obviously they acknowledge that there's stigma, that it's quote unquote wrong. And no one wants to think of themselves as a villain or someone that's doing something completely wrong. However, I think there's just this lack of awareness that they're being nasty, or there is an awareness that they're nasty. But either way, it is a protective mechanism to say, you know what, it's not me, it's you. And I've seen
Absolutely.
it. And the
Okay.
thing is, it's not just white people. What I'm saying too is that even within and among ethnic minorities, I've seen the backlash as well. Like, again, one of our viral posts was, Sheena Yat Chan really talking about the stereotypes that are put out there for Asian women. And
Yes.
we've gotten so many hate comments.
Interesting.
One, go back to China. We're both not from China.
I know,
Two,
right?
I mean, I'm personally not, my family is, of course.
That's the
Um,
default, right?
yeah,
Go
get
back
out.
to no, like no, I was actually born right in Torrance, but but it's okay though.
Exactly. And I speak perfect English, born and raised in San Francisco, yada yada. So, and then the other aspects were like, oh, you have victim envy, you just need to try harder. Let's talk about that piece, because I think that is an aspect of American culture that
100%.
gets on my last nerve, because I'm like,
Oh my God.
if we just try harder, we can achieve what the majority achieve. So let's talk about that. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
So I'm so happy that you brought that up, Stephanie. A couple months ago, someone I guess they maybe commented, or it was a post, or I think that I was doing a talk. I'm sorry, yeah, I was doing a talk, and someone had brought up grit. And
Yep.
it's like, well, you know, should we teach children of color grit, right? Like, should we teach them, oh, it doesn't matter, you have to have grit to survive. You need to try hard. Here's the thing. In America, we are really in love with this pull yourself up by your bootstraps lie. I mean, just being honest with you. Like it's very romantic to see a person that come from the bottom makes it all the way to the top, right? I made it on my own. I didn't need anything. I had grit. And I know that doesn't exist, right? Like 75% of all jobs are gained by people that you know. It's a term of I learned in 2013 from my friend Karen Fleshman. It's called social capital. Most of the wealth in America is held generationally, right?
Yes.
So it's not, your parents or your grandparents, but it was like their parents. So the people that say that they're not being honest about where they come from, how they were able to be successful. If we even look at legacy admissions in colleges, a quarter to a little over a quarter. I'm saying, I believe like maybe it's even larger. I believe it's like maybe it's almost even like 40% of all admittance in places like Harvard, Yale, their legacy admittance. So, they don't need grit. If you look at entertainment, it's all nepotism. They don't need grit. So asking a person to just sort of power through discrimination that they face, it's lazy, and you're just bypassing what really is holding people back. Listen, there are a lot of brilliant people out here, right? There are just incredibly smart people, and they are not successful because they didn't have the connections. There's a great quote from this University of Phoenix commercial where the announcer says, or the voiceover says, talent is given to everyone, but resources is only given to a few, right?
Mm.
So we're supposed to have grit, Stephanie. We're supposed to just, no matter what, just power through it. And that's just not realistic. He
Right.
like I hate that shit too. It's like you need to work harder. Look, fam, like when I think about um nepotism, when I think about the legacy and just social capital, Jared Kushner always pops in my head. Like this is a young man who got into Harvard, who was not a very good student. I mean, he who got into business, wasn't very successful, married Trump's daughter. I mean, just failing up, constantly failing up. He's an example of someone who didn't even wasn't even exposed to grit. So it's very easy for someone to say you need to have grit when you started on third base. You know
That's
what I
a
mean?
that's a
Like,
good point. And I think, I talked with Dr. Ayoade about this in a recent interview, and from Nigeria, and has and cited grit as something that he's had. Now, I want to say this because I'm an integrative, holistic kind of a perspective, is that grit is very important to persevere during tough times. And in theory,
absolutely.
right? Absolutely. But what we're talking about is contextually, that is not enough with some folks to be able to achieve, because there are certain limits sometimes, and a lot of times, like we said, systemically, that are barriers to being able to achieve what we want and what we
Absolutely.
are capable of achieving. And so I even think when you brought up like Ivy Leagues, a lot of times people say, well, we have enough. When they think there are too many Asians, they start putting these things of like, they are not oppressed. They are not,
Right.
you
Exactly.
know, they are not struggling, because you see more people of Asian descent getting
Yes,
into
ma'am.
these Ivy League schools. So then now we don't need affirmative action or anything like
Right.
that. So when there are advances, I think, in terms of seeing some more equality in numbers, for instance, then there's no longer an issue. Racism is solved, right?
Absolutely.
So I think this is really important to talk about. Let's talk about circumstances, because as we talked offline about it, the justice system, we're opening up huge topics here, guys. Incarceration,
This
all
is
these
not light
things.
conversation.
This is not. And this is
yeah,
why we're here, is to
right.
really open up these conversations. And I imagine there's going to be tons of hate comments, but hey, let's put it out. Let's put it out in the open that how do you expect people not to go to, let's say, crime in the sense of drug use, distribution, etc. Now, people are going to say, well, they shouldn't be committing crimes. But let's put it into context. An individual who grows up in an impoverished neighborhood, possibly without citizenship, possibly in a single household, a single parent household, or a caregiver who's addicted to drugs because of this cycle of poverty. I always say one of the worst diseases is poverty.
That is so that is so true.
In any country, because you see it in various countries. I've traveled all around the world, and the folks that do not have access to funds or opportunities are struggling. Now, the percentages of people or the income disparities may be very different, so I don't want to overgeneralize, but let's put that out there. Those demographics, and this is not like a one-off. So what happens to those folks? What do you think happens in the justice system when folks or children are exposed to things like that?
Well, that's a very good question. So we have to look at it like from a as 360 level, right? So you brought up some really good points regarding poverty. Just kind of reminded me of there's this movie I saw I think it was called Hell on High Water, something like that, and it was such a great quote. Towards the end of the movie, Chris Pine's character said, poverty is like a disease that goes from generation to generation. And I'm telling you, Stephanie, I never forgot. I was like, wow, that is so powerful. And it really and what you said really resonated. So we live in a country that is not only racist, but is very capitalistic. And to quote Malcolm X, if you find a capitalist, you find a bloodsucker. So you are in a country where money is just paramount, which I mean, money is important everywhere, right? When you grow up, when you don't have resources, when you don't have stable household, because see, check it. If you look at every ethnic group that came over here, Italians, Polish, Jewish, Irish, they pretty much went through the same struggle. They, soon as they got in, they were stereotyped, they were discriminated, they were told go home, right?
Yep.
So some of the people, and this is not an excuse, but it's an explanation. So I really want people to understand what I'm saying here. They chose to become what we would call sidewalk executives, right? Or into the black market and to commit crimes. The difference between the Italian, Irish, Polish, Jewish, and black people is that they were able to be white. They were able to become white. And that's a very important concept, because every time a group came over, they were not quote unquote white. They were able to become white later. I've grown up in an impoverished area, right? And I've seen people commit crimes. I've some people that I love, would sell drugs. At the end of the day, you have to survive. So if you are in a place where they won't hire you because you look a certain way, you don't run in the same circles, you have to support your family, because one thing about money in the Black community, Stephanie, is that money flows down. So we're always subsidizing people. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that, with it within your community, where it's like, someone is successful, and so they're always helping somebody else out,
Yeah.
right? So if you have um, opportunities closing your face over and over and over and over and over. As I said in my talk for Oxford, you're gonna say F it. You're gonna do what you gotta do, and crime may be an option. You know, no one who is committing crimes, who's being a quote unquote thug, wants that lifestyle. That's a very tenuous. It's a very unforgiving lifestyle. However, if you have to support yourself, support your family, you're going to do what you have to do to get where you got to get. And that's just what it is.
That's very well said. I mean, I,
Thank you.
I think one thing to throw out there though is, why do you think people don't get that? And that's a bigger question, right? Because we could talk about this all day. You and I get it. And at the
Right.
same time, it's like, well, they should really do something that to better their circumstances, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think can really drive home the point to people that really don't get it? Because they're not going to go into impoverished neighborhoods necessarily and live there for a month or whatnot to experience it.
You know
So,
what?
yeah.
And so I didn't, so, again, circling back to poverty, right? I
Hmm.
didn't understand real poverty until I went to Central America. That's real poverty. Down south, and Southern America. We've got a couple shanty towns, right? Just people. If you go to West Virginia, there's quite a bit of poverty there. You go to Central America, that's real poverty. Like, that's clay homes. That's no running water. That's You're just doing what you got to do to survive. So you brought up earlier how there's some folks that may not be U.S. citizens coming over here. Look, first first off, because of America's insatiable drug habit, that's one of the reasons why places like Mexico and Honduras are in such disarray. Because of the drug war, because America's the largest drug consumer in the world, right? So not only that, but just also due to many U.S. led, I guess, quote unquote, invasions that have destabilized the country. But that's neither here nor there. I was having this conversation well, with someone recently, and we talked about theft in San Francisco. And I don't like thieves. I think it's just a dirty way to live. However, people who are stealing from these stores to survive, they're doing it because there's no other option. When you live in a city where the wealth disparity is so upside down, like, I mean, San Francisco is it's offensively expensive. So when you cannot afford housing, when you can't get a job without an address, right, Stephanie?
Yep.
So but I can't get an address if I don't have a job. Most of all homeless there are people that used to have housing. So
There's also the mental health crisis I want to throw
there's a
in there, because I think
humongous.
when people are saying, let's build more housing, right? People that get into those housing that are, may have substance use disorders, other mental health co-occurring issues, they're the rate of becoming homeless again is so high. We cannot address homelessness without, like you said, these wraparound services of helping with employment, helping with citizenship and mental health care, because it's just not a one-shot approach, a one fix solution. And so the disparities that you talk about are absolutely stark. I mean, I had a friend come from Florida and she went to the Tenderloin and was just like, from one block to the next, right?
It's insane.
It's so apparent just what is going on. And so, again, I think that there are just so many ways that this needs to be addressed, which brings me to the point of, if you can make one change in society where you know, this is going to happen, if you had unlimited resources,
Right.
what would you do?
If I had, if I had unlimited resources, wow, that is really, hmm. Um, I think that at this moment, we need to tackle housing more than anything. I think housing and criminal justice. I definitely feel like that the mass incarceration engine monster is just insane. But I feel like that seeing people, it's something about seeing people homeless that is just, it's never really set right with me. And I know people are gonna be like, duh, but just seeing families homeless. I think, and I'm just speaking from what I see, and this is just my opinion. But I think the number one thing is that we need to get people housing. You know, but Stephanie, some people are what you call housing resistant, right? Some people just want to be out
Yes.
to the street. So I definitely feel like mental health is something that needs to be addressed. I mean, I don't think that, and just speaking from California, I don't think that we've ever addressed it in a real way. I mean, people are self-medicating. They are. I mean, when I moved to San Francisco, I had never seen people having mental episodes on the street, just walking around,
Yeah.
talking, yelling, fight. I was like, wow, this is something totally different because I was in San Diego before, and seeing that, it's just it's truly heartbreaking. So I just think that more than anything, we need to get these people off the street, get them in housing so that they can be away from from not having a home.
Yeah. So, we are very familiar with San Francisco Bay Area tech culture. And so, what can we do in these corporate settings to really offset some of this disparity, as well as open up some of the conversations?
Sure.
Clearly, having the conversation we're having would definitely be very controversial, and people would feel very uncomfortable, probably not talk to us for some time or ever.
Right.
But I wonder, since you have experience in that arena, what are ways that we can continue the conversation, at least so people aren't shutting down?
Well, in regards to tech, is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tech is a very white space. It's a very white male space. The last time I checked, Stephanie, I think it was like 80% male, 20% female. I'm sorry, 20% women. And it could be, it could be worse than that. But first off, there needs to be a gender um, problem that needs to be solved. Secondly, tech is also very racist. If you look at companies like Google, I believe they have like 3% black folks. It was Apple's got like 4. Like the leader is Netflix. They have about 8. It's sad that we can champion 8%. I mean, Reed Hastings is looking like a leader, which is sad. But one of the things, again, when you talk about tech, you talk about culture fit, and many people are not hired because they don't quote unquote fit the culture. That could be, oh, I didn't go to the same school as you did, Stephanie. Oh, I don't look like you. I don't hang with you. I wrote a piece for Rancateur, which is a UK business magazine, and I interviewed this young man, and he said he felt isolated because he didn't listen to the same bands as his coworkers. He didn't get the jokes. He didn't hang out with them. And
Mhm.
so with tech is supposed to be all about innovation, right? But it's not, because you can't truly be innovative if everyone looks and thinks like you. You like it's not a mistake that you have 2 or 3% of your staff is black. That tells me that you don't want us there. And if we do get in there, Stephanie, the environment is so bad, it's so toxic, it's so ruthless. We want to leave.
Mhm.
You know, I've said this before, like I would never work for one of those big tech firms ever, because I understand what it's like to be black in areas that just don't want you there. And I feel like that at this point in my life and in a lot of our lives, we shouldn't fight to be in places that don't really want us there. There's a saying that I heard recently: go where you're celebrated.
Mhm.
Don't we're so busy trying to force our way into places and trying to prove that we are just as good and just as intelligent and just as creative, when in actuality we'll never win that battle, because it's like Toni Morrison,
Mhm.
the late great author. She talked about racism, and she said something. It was so ill. She's like, racism, it's all about proving your humanity, proving who you are. So you can say, okay, well, I can do this. Well, what about that? Well, I can do this. Well, what about this? So there's always going to be something. So at what point do you say to yourself, you know what, this isn't worth my time, this isn't worth my energy. I would rather be somewhere that I am celebrated. And
And creating
so
spaces where you can celebrate
absolutely. I
others
mean,
as well. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's like tech has impacted all of our lives. I mean, just in such a real way that, look, this thing is with me all the time. I
I'm
mean,
highly thinking about selling mine, by the way, because
really? Why?
yeah, because I feel like every time that thing pings, even if it's like a junk email or whatever, I'm just like, ugh, I just feel so
Right.
tied to it. And I realized that during the break when I took it off, I felt so free. And I haven't sold mine yet because, the other thing is it what at one point saved my life because I was having a heartbeat that was so that it was like I was exercising, but I'd been sleeping for 2 hours when I had high fever and GI issues. And so that really helped me. The and part is I think there's this piece of me and this part of me that doesn't want to feel like I'm tied to it all the time.
Right.
Um, and I'm so
I
reliant
hear
on
you.
it, you know? So I
You know
think
what's
there's a
funny?
balance.
Yeah, what's funny? Like like when I was younger, Stephanie, like I used to just like leave my phone at home, and I would just walk around and just be out. Now it's like we're just tied. It's sad. Like we're captive to it.
Yeah. So,
Just
of course, like I use tech all the time. There's all sorts of benefits to it. But like I said, I think people we have to find the humanity again in each
absolutely,
other. Because when you're
absolutely
sitting at the dinner table on your phone, and I'm guilty of it, it's just
right.
like, am I really being present with my family and
Yes,
so forth?
yes, ma'am. I
So
totally
the reason why I invited you is to celebrate you and all the things that
thank
you've
you.
done because
That's awesome.
you have done so many things and there's a bravery in speaking up. So,
Thank you.
where can people learn more about your work?
Yes, so you can go to www.leronbarton.com. That's LeronBarton.com. Many of my articles, my TEDx, my talks, my podcast interviews. This one will be on there as well as my books. So yeah, you can find out who I am, what makes me tick, and all that stuff. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
all right, this has been a pleasure. I I do a lot of podcasts, and I just felt like this was a very intelligent talk. So, I mean,
Thank you.
I'm not surprised, but but I mean, though, but seriously, though, but thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have today. Thank you, LeRon, for discussing the issues with colorblindness, the disease that is poverty, and how systemic racism impacts some folks' ability to advance their lives despite having grit. If you want to connect more with LeRon, visit LeRonBarton.com. Don't forget to subscribe at colorsuccesspodcast.com, where you will get more exclusive contact with LeRon. Also, remember to book your seats for my brand new book coming out, Cancel the Filter, where I will be revealing to you all of the unspoken realities of how I've learned to navigate the challenges of my own mental health as a working mother, psychologist, and podcaster. All behind the scenes, all unfiltered. The first 50 reservations will receive a signed copy and an invitation to exclusive launch events. Book now, as there are limited signed copies left at colorsuccesspodcast.com. In our next episode, we will be talking to Rosie Lonnie Fiedelman, star of The Lion King on Broadway. She and I delve into the impact of COVID on Broadway and performing artists, the prevalence of physical issues and body image on Broadway, and ways to improve mental health. So if you've ever come across these topics, this is definitely for you. So hit that like, subscribe, and follow button to stay updated. As always, friends, may it all be well with you. With gratitude, Stephanie.